Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Leadership in Medicine. Today, we have the honor of welcoming a very special guest, John Hagel. John has just written his book, Journey Beyond Fear. And John has spent over 40 years in Silicon Valley as a management consultant, as a speaker, an author, and an entrepreneur. And after retiring as a partner from Deloitte, he launched two ventures. He's also authored many books, including his recent book, Journey Beyond Fear. Apart from that, he has also written best-selling business titles, The Power of Pull, Net Gain, Net Worth, Out of the Box, and The Only Sustainable Edge. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, great. Looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So, I know you've studied leadership from a lot of different perspectives. Can you tell us what was the motivation for writing your recent book?
Well, I was working as a consultant, serving leaders around the world in large organizations, and um, this was about 7 or 8 years ago now. I was experiencing the increasing emotion of fear at all levels, at the highest levels of the organization, at the lowest levels, out in the communities. And while I think it's an understandable emotion, it's also, I think, a very limiting emotion. And so I really wanted to pull together a lot of the research that I'd been doing to help people see how they could make the journey beyond fear and really cultivate emotions that would help them to have more impact that's meaningful to them.
Absolutely. And I think that conversation is more relevant today than any other time because of the political and social upheaval and the trends that are going on in the economy. I think people are getting increasingly more, um, I would say, fearful of change, and also um, they don't know how to navigate that change.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, what do you think the leadership should be focused on in order to navigate such tumultuous times?
Well, I think that it's complicated. There are many different elements that need to come together, but I think that I should clarify that when I talk about fear, I'm talking about fear of the future. When you
Right.
look into the future, do you see it mainly as a threat or as an opportunity? And I think, again, more and more people are seeing the future as very threatening, very scary. I don't want to go there.
Mm.
And so I think that the opportunity for leaders is to really shift the focus in about the future from threat to opportunity. It's to help people to see amazing things could we accomplish if we all came together. And um, I've become a strong proponent of a specific form of strategy that I call zoom out, zoom in. But it comes from having worked with some of the most successful tech companies in Silicon Valley. And they have a very different approach to strategy than most companies. The zoom out, zoom in focuses on two time horizons.
Mhm.
One time horizon is 10 to 20 years. That's out in the distant future. And the question there is, what's the really exciting, large opportunity that we could be addressing in the next 10 to 20 years?
Correct.
Then there's the zoom in, which is a very different time horizon. It's 10 to 6 to 12 months. And in that horizon, the question is, what are the two or three initiatives, no more, two or three initiatives that we could be taking in the next 6 to 12 months that would help to accelerate our movement towards that longer term opportunity? And do we have a critical mass of resources committed to those two or three initiatives in the next 6 to 12 months? And I think this is a powerful approach to strategy in a rapidly changing time for many reasons. But one is that going back to the question of emotions, um, if you can help people to see a really exciting opportunity out in the future, that starts to help them overcome the fear of the future. But most people who are driven by fear are still going to be very skeptical. They're going to say, wait a minute, that's just a fantasy. That's never going to happen 10 to 20 years from now. We just need to focus on today. But if in the next 6 to 12 months you can show tangible progress
Mhm.
towards that really exciting big opportunity out in the future, now you start to overcome the skepticism. And people start to say, wow, you were able to do that in 6 to 12 months? How can I help? What can I do to join this effort? And so I think it's a very powerful way to help people overcome fear and start to build excitement about the future.
That is correct. And I believe the leadership plays a very important role in creating that vision and helping people move towards that vision.
Yeah,
Because I feel not all leaders can sort of lead people in a way that makes them feel passionate about pursuing something that is not tangible at the moment.
yeah, no, it's a challenge. I think again, if people are driven by fear, they tend to shrink their time horizon. They just want to focus on today. And it's complicated again. There are all sorts of pressures that mount. One of them, when I talk to leaders, they say, we can't focus on the future. We have to, our investors just want us to make the quarterly performance. If we don't make the next quarter, or miss it by a point or two, we're going to lose our jobs.
Correct.
And I understand and I'm sympathetic to that, but on the other hand, my challenge back is, well, when was the last time you went to your investors and articulated a really exciting, exponentially large opportunity that you could be pursuing in the next 10 to 20 years? And they would look at me and say, well, I couldn't possibly do that. That's too uncertain. There's too much uncertainty. And my response is, okay, well, what do you expect investors to measure you on? If they don't
Mhm.
have that view of the future, all they can do is focus on the present and the next quarter. And it becomes kind of a vicious cycle. The more they focus on the next quarter, the more the leaders focus on it, the more the leaders focus on it, the more the investors. And it's just this cascade of just becoming more and more focused on the present versus looking ahead into the future.
That is correct. And I know that you also mentioned, last time we had a conversation, something referring to sustainable edge and how that plays a role in the business. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, and specifically, I think I was referring to scaling the edge,
Right.
which is, again, an approach to change, to transformation that I think is very helpful in addressing the fear and resistance of people. One of the things that I advise leaders if they're talking about change and transformation is to never, ever underestimate the power of the immune system and the antibodies that exist in every large organization. And at the slightest indication of a desire for change, are going to mobilize to crush it, to keep us focused on what has led to success in the past. Let's just keep doing what we've been doing. And these are not evil people. They're very well-intentioned people, but they're driven by fear. Again, the fear says, don't take any risk, don't do anything different, just keep doing what you've been doing. And so in that context, driving fundamental change in an organization is very challenging. The immune system and the antibodies are
Yeah.
going to mobilize. And I've become a proponent of an approach that I call scaling the edge,
Right.
which is rather than trying to go top down and say we need to change everything, everywhere. Start with by focusing on an edge of your existing organization, a place with relatively modest resources, revenue, people. But again, if you've done the zoom out, zoom in and looked ahead, you could see that edge could potentially scale to become the new core of your business, not just a diversification or growth effort. It will be the new core of your business and start to drive the change by bringing together a group of people who have real passion and excitement about the need for change into that small edge. And again, in the next 6 to 12 months, show real progress in moving, scaling that edge. And so over time, you draw more and more of the people and resources from the core of your business out to that edge, to the point where it becomes the new core of your business, and that drives the change that you really need. And the immune system and antibodies are not that driven about the edge. It's a small piece of the puzzle, and it's over there, and so they're going to be less resistant to that than if you're trying to go in and change them.
Right.
Uh, so I think it's a very promising way to drive change.
Yes, that is a brilliant concept. And I also want to talk about how, disruption in across the board in all industries has been going on, but now, especially with the AI, there seems to be significant disruption in all business units across all industries. And I think that people who were initially reticent to change are now sort of looking for ways how to manage or control that. Because, at the end of the day, disruption is inevitable. It can happen anytime. So what do you think would be the impact of AI on this disruption, and how do we move forward so that we have some frameworks that can maintain some form of stability?
Well, again, it's challenging. I think that everybody's talking about AI these days, and in my experience, it's driving a lot of the fear that people have. We're all going to lose our jobs. We won't have any work. We'll be homeless. We'll be on the streets. And again, I don't want to dismiss that, but I think that I'll generalize as I tend to do because we have short time. Um, in my experience, talking to leaders of large organizations, when we talk about AI, they have two questions.
Hmm.
First question is, how quickly can I automate? And how
Hmm.
many jobs can I eliminate?
Mm.
It's all about efficiency,
Yeah.
cut costs, eliminate people. And that feeds the fear because the people, even though the leaders may not be saying that publicly,
Mm.
they see what the actions are, and the actions are about trying to eliminate people wherever they can with AI. And so I think that it's going to be again, AI can be very disruptive. That is not disruptive in itself. If the leaders just cut costs, okay, they're going to get smaller and smaller organizations, and but they won't have an organization that is really focused on how to learn faster and achieve more, create more value in the environment. And that's what a rapidly changing world requires and needs. So I'm a strong believer that the leaders have to shift from the model of scalable efficiency, which is what I believe drives most large organizations today, to a model of scalable learning, where
Yes.
the real focus is on how can we learn faster together, and not just in our innovation centers or research laboratories, but across the entire organization. How can everyone learn faster? And again, I have to be careful because when I talk about learning, most people say, oh, well, we have training programs, we have workshops, so we do a lot of learning. No, I would argue that that is largely learning in the form of sharing existing knowledge.
Hmm.
If you're listening to a teacher or some leader, they have the knowledge, they're sharing it with the others. And in a rapidly changing world, existing knowledge is becoming obsolete at an accelerating rate. So if all you're doing is sharing existing knowledge, you're sharing an increasingly obsolete resource. The learning that's most necessary and valuable in a rapidly changing time is learning in the form of creating entirely new knowledge. And that doesn't occur in a training room. That occurs in the workplace as you confront new situations that have never been confronted before and have to come up with creative approaches to addressing that and delivering more and more value. And so the it's I just give one example of where I think we should be headed, but again, in most organizations, we're not. This is a clinical laboratory company, and in their call center operations, they were confronting a situation where the customers were becoming more and more unhappy and leaving the business, and then the call center operators were becoming more and more upset, and they were leaving their jobs. And the leader of the call center department brought all the call center operators together, and he said, "First thing, I give you a promise. None of you are going to lose your jobs. You will all continue to be employed." Said, but your first assignment is to go to the IT department, work with the IT department to figure out how to automate all these routine calls that you're handling and it's consuming all your time. But where you have a script, it's all been written out because it's been confronted many times before. Just read the script. No, automate that. Get the AI to do that. And with all the time that gets freed up for you, come together in small groups. He called them nodes of about 5 people, where and identify a really challenging customer question that has never been encountered before, and come up with a really creative answer to that question to help that customer. Long story short, in a very short period of time, customer satisfaction went way up.
Right.
And the passion of the workers went way up in the call center because now they were doing things that had never been done before, and only they had done it. It wasn't that anybody could do it reading the same script. So it was really exciting. And again, I think that illustrates the potential of using AI to free up people so that they can focus on challenging new situations and learn how to create more and more value in those situations rather than just reading the script and doing the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely, yes. So I worked for Unilever. I created a database of skin diseases for a Unilever call center. And along those lines, this was prior to AI, but we kind of like, sorted most of the questions in certain buckets. And you're right, like if you automate certain aspects of it, the client satisfaction rate goes way up.
Yeah, it's and I used the call center as an example, but in my experience, virtually all work in all large organizations is based on manuals and scripts. It's
Yeah.
all been written out. It's very tightly specified routine tasks that need to be
Yes.
done in exactly the same way all the time. And in a rapidly changing world, that's a prescription for disaster, for disruption. And I think until and unless we all start to focus ourselves on and not just, push people to do this, but pull them with excitement about this is an opportunity to create value that's never been created before. And
Absolutely.
I should also mention, again, it's many different dimensions to this, but one of the things that people talk about is the need for skill building.
Hmm.
And I tend to be a bit of a contrarian on that because, again, it depends on definitions of words, but skills, the way I think about it, are things that are valuable in a very specific context. How to operate this machine in this environment, how to do this kind of processing in this environment. That's a skill. And it's very valuable in that specific environment, but not very helpful anywhere else.
Correct.
In contrast, I believe what we need to do is focus on cultivating capabilities, not skills. And the distinction for me is that capabilities are valuable in every context, no matter where you are. And it includes things like curiosity,
Yes.
imagination, creativity, collaboration. All of those things are extremely helpful in learning in the form of creating new knowledge.
Yeah.
And very relatively few people in organizations have those capabilities and are not focused on cultivating those capabilities. So I think that's again a shift that has to occur is to really start to focus on cultivating these capabilities and creating work environments where people can, exercise those capabilities.
I know. So from my experience, I'm a physician, so I can speak from healthcare industry perspective and how, it's in shambles. People are not happy on both ends. Like physicians, clinicians, healthcare workers are not happy. Patients are not happy. And it's hard to then create that kind of change because things are so interconnected and also so complex that shifting one end would mean disrupting all, but then disruption is necessary, especially now with the AI. And I was just having a conversation with this a person who was the former CFO of Kaiser Permanente, and he was telling me about those old school computers that used to, and I have not seen them, but then he was referring to them and then how epic shifted certain aspects of it, but now with a rapid transformation like you said, there's going to be change, but we tend to stick to those protocols because we're scared, what would happen if we don't. All of us are very risk averse, so in how do we then maintain that edge while still not going all out in destroying the system or disrupting the system?
No, well, again, I don't want to suggest it's easy. It's very challenging. I'll go back to the zoom out, zoom in. I mentioned on zoom in that it's focusing on 2 to 3 initiatives you can take in the next six
Right.
to 12 months. And in my experience, there's a filter that I apply to test those 2 to 3 initiatives. I believe one of the initiatives should be scaling the edge. So finding an edge and starting to scale it in the next 6 to 12 months. What is that edge? Second initiative is what's the one thing you can do in the next 6 to 12 months that would have the greatest impact in strengthening the existing core of your business?
Mhm.
Because even though it's going to end up obsolete, that's where the money is coming from today. So let's make it as strong as possible and generate as much as we can from it. And then the third initiative in the next 6 to 12 months, this is the most challenging, is identify a significant part of your business and organization which you could shed or close down or sell in the next 6 to 12 months because it's so marginal, it's draining resources, and it never has the potential to generate more resource and more value for people. So shut it down, free up the resources so you can strengthen the core and scale the edge. And I think that's something that can be very helpful to large organizations in really starting to make the move.
Correct. That is a really good strategy. Thank you for sharing that. I know you mentioned that you worked for Atari, right? Can you,
Yeah.
that's such an interesting concept. Can you speak a little bit more about this and if you can share some of your stories?
Oh, wow. It was quite a while ago. And when I joined Atari, this was back in the early 1980s, it had been made the record in the US of the company that generated $1 billion in revenue the quickest of any other company. No other company had done it so quickly as Atari. And the result was the leadership had become extremely complacent. They
Mm,
weren't driven by fear, they were driven by complacency. Everything's wonderful. We've done amazing things. We are geniuses. We will continue to do amazing things. But it was just continue to do what we've always done because those led to so much success. And it created vulnerability because they weren't seeing the changes that were occurring around them and the need to really adapt in a very significant way. And so I think it was a lesson to me about not just being concerned about fear, but being concerned about complacency. If you're so successful, you tend to believe, oh my goodness, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and everything will be wonderful. And, no, in a rapidly changing world, the key to being successful is to change as rapidly as the world is changing. And another quick story from Atari, which really shaped a lot of my subsequent work and thinking. At the time, the person who was the chief financial officer of Atari had a dream of buying a vineyard in Northern California in the wine country and becoming a winemaker. And we all told him he was absolutely insane, that, he was an accountant. What did he know about making wine? Just keep doing what you've been doing. And to his credit, he ignored our advice and he went out and bought a vineyard. And he's now the owner of one of the most successful vineyards in Napa Valley in California. And he, the key lesson that I learned from that experience was that if you have a passion that really excites you, to have more and more impact in a specific domain, you need to pursue that passion. Don't just do what is creating revenue right at the moment, but find your passion and pursue it. And again, excuse me, I think in the world today, passion is viewed as very suspect,
Yeah.
in large organizations. Why would you want a passionate worker? They ask too many questions. They take too many risks. They deviate from the script. Well, in my view, the passionate workers are the ones who learn the fastest because they're constantly asking questions and trying to find ways to have more and more impact. And what we need to do is have everyone um, cultivate their passion and pursue their passion and create environments that encourage them to do that. I'll say too, I get a lot of pushback from executives about passion. They say, "Oh, come on, some of us are capable of passion, but only a few. Most of us just want to be told what to do and have the security of an income." And my response to that is, well, let's go to a playground and let's look at children 5 or 6 years old. Show me one that's not really excited about exploring new territories, new things, and coming together with others to do that. We all had that passion as a child. The problem is we went to school and we were taught, listen to the teacher, memorize what the teacher has to say, and show you've memorized it on the exams. If you have passion, do it in the playground or at home, but not here in the classroom. And it was to prepare students for the work environment, where again, I've generalized, but in large organizations, passion is largely discouraged. And
Yeah.
so,
That is correct. It kind of straight jackets, I feel, human potential when you put people who are passionate in environments which are very controlled or, where they don't have the capacity to express themselves.
yeah.
And you're right, I'm a very passionate person, but I know that sometimes it doesn't come across as passionate. It comes across as a threat.
And again, I should clarify because when I use the word passion, everybody nods their heads. And in workshops that I've done, I ask people, well, define passion for me. What do I mean by passion? And when I go around the room, I'll get a different definition from every person in the room. We all use the same word, but we have a different meaning to it, a different definition. And the passion that I'm talking about comes from the research that I've done, where I was looking at environments where there's sustained extreme performance improvement. And I said, what can we learn from those environments? And one of the things I found is all the participants in those environments, even though they were very diverse environments, all the participants had a very specific form of passion
Mm-hmm.
that I've come to call the passion of the explorer. But
Mm-hmm.
people with this passion are excited about having more and more impact in a specific domain. It could be
Mm-hmm.
anything from gardening to nuclear physics, but they're committed to a domain and excited about having more and more impact. Even though they've been very successful, had a lot of impact, their question is, how can I have even more impact? And they're driven by that. And they're excited about unexpected challenges. That gives them an opportunity to learn how to have even more impact. They seek out those challenges. And they also, their first reaction when confronted with those challenges is, who else can I connect with? Who can help me get to a better answer faster? They're constantly asking for help. And that builds trust. They're expressing vulnerability. I don't know the answer. I need help. Can you help me? And so they're very connected with others and seeking to come up with better and better answers to whatever they're confronting.
Very true. I think those are famous like words of wisdom that we're learning here. I think it's time to wrap up. I would love to continue our conversation, but I know we have to wrap up now. Anything that you would like to say to our audience, especially in terms of leadership? What would be your advice for leaders?
Boy, well, I think the first piece of advice is to recognize the world's rapidly changing. I think most of them do, but the interesting paradox about the changes, and I've studied this, long-term trends that are reshaping the global economy and society. Um, on the one side, those trends are creating mounting performance pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Competition is intensifying on a global scale. Pace of change is accelerating at a rate we never thought imaginable. Things we thought we could count on are no longer there. That mounting performance pressure is, I believe, a key generator of the fear, the emotion of fear that we're experiencing. But the paradox, the interesting paradox, is those same trends at the same time are creating exponentially expanding opportunity.
Yeah.
We can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than would have ever been imaginable a few decades ago. But if we're driven by fear, we can't even see those opportunities, much less be motivated to pursue them. And so I think the key message for the leaders is to recognize that the change we're experiencing is generating exponentially expanding opportunity. But to address them, we need to overcome the fear. First of all, the fear that we as leaders have within ourselves, but then the fear that is consuming many of the people in our organization. And so focusing on things like zoom out, zoom in, and scaling the edge as approaches to help people overcome their fear becomes critical. And I think, again, a key message to leaders is it's contrary to a lot of the business world wisdom, which is forget about emotions, just focus on the numbers and the analysis and do that. My advice to leaders is focus on the emotions. If you don't understand the emotions that are driving you and the people in your organization and cannot evolve those emotions in ways that will help them to have much more impact that's meaningful, all the analysis is useless. It's got to be focused on how do we change the emotions that are increasingly holding us back.
Absolutely. I feel like I've taken a whole module at Harvard Business School. This is how I feel. I've learned so much from this. Thank you so much, John, for taking time out. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our audience will appreciate it. And I will link the book. Um, your latest book in the comment section and also provide people with any other links that you deem would be useful. Do you think there's anything else you would like to add to that?
No, well, I think definitely would welcome people reading the book and welcome feedback on the book, what's helpful from it. But I'm getting a lot of positive feedback now, and it's motivated me to create a new center that I call the Center for Growth that will offer programs based on the book to help people in making that journey beyond fear. So I would encourage, if you're interested, to see that. I have a website, centerforgrowth.net, which
Okay.
really will be the launch pad for the programs that we're offering. And I think it can be very helpful to leaders in terms of not only their own evolution, but helping to evolve the people in their organization.
Absolutely. I will provide the links to our audience. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you once again for taking time out.
Great. Well, I appreciate the interest for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.